Hello, in this lesson, we're going to be looking at our final transformation and its rotations. Now, if there's one that's going to give you a little bit of trouble, it's going to be this one. However, the good news is I have some methods and I have a routine that I'm going to teach you, and it's going to be able to help you to figure out these anytime that you approach them, whether it's on the STAR test or on an assessment. So let's start by first looking at the rule. Our rule here says the rule is you swap X and Y every 90 degrees and change the sign of the number that was first in the ordered pair. So whatever number is first in the ordered pair, in other words, it's in place of where the X would normally be, you're going to change that sign of that number. Now this may sound a little confusing. I call this the swap and change method. If you look right here, this just gives you an example. If your original ordered pair is X and Y, and you each rotate 90 degrees, you're going to move the X to where the Y was, and you're going to change the sign. And then the Y is going to come forward to where the X was, and it stays the same. If you do it 180 degrees, you just swap and change again. The Y goes back, and it changes its sign, and this negative X, all right, that means sign change X, comes up to the front. And then if you change it another 90 degrees, which is 270 degrees, then this X pulls back to the back, it turns its sign. Notice that that negative sign's gone because you had to change the sign again, and the Y stays the same. And then if you notice, if you do 360, the Y moves to the back and changes its sign, and now you're back to what you started with, positive XY. So while that may look confusing, I'm going to show you how that works in just a moment, and we're going to try one out. So let's go ahead and take a look at this first one. Notice it says that I want you to do a 90 degrees clockwise about the origin. Alright, so I'm going to start out. I do notice that this says that it wants me to go 90 degrees clockwise. In other words, this is the rule I'm going to be using. Now, some of you may just be able to memorize these rules. I'm going to be honest with you, I have never been able to memorize them. To this day, I don't have 4 of these rules memorized. If you can memorize them, then you're good to go. You won't even need to remember swap and change. But I can remember swap and change because it's very easy to swap the letters and change a sign. With that being said, let's go ahead and find our 3 ordered pairs. And we're going to go ahead and write our algebraic rule as well. Now first, write the algebraic rule, because that's how we always start out. So I have X and Y. Since it says a 90 degree change, that means that I'm going to use this rule, right? We have Y comma negative X. So we swapped our Y, right? And then we changed the sign of our X that we moved back. So that is the rule, and I just looked right over here at what we had. And so 90 degrees, right? Swap and change. X moved to the back. We had a sign change. Y moved to the front. And that's how I got that. Now I'm going to go ahead and box that real quick. Put a little arrow. That's a 90 degrees change. And let's go ahead and put our ordered pairs. So for instance, we're going to do just like we always do. We'll write our ordered pairs. So I have J. When I do this swap and change method, I'm going to go ahead and then have my J prime. We have K, and then we're going to have K prime, then we're going to have L, and we'll end up with L prime. Alright, the good thing is we don't have to do any math, right? We're not multiplying anything. All we're doing is swapping the number's position and changing a sign on it. So let's find J real quick. If I want to find J, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have negative 4, positive 4. One thing that I did want to tell you as well, and I'm going to actually use my marker to show you here. If we move 90 degrees clockwise, remember our image is just going to move 1 quadrant, right? For every 90 degrees we move 1 quadrant. We said that when I introduced these topics to you. So my triangle should end up over here. If my points go anywhere else other than right here in quadrant 1, I know I've done something wrong. So just keep that in mind. And if we do K, we go over 1, that's negative 1 for the X, and then up 1, 2, 3, that's positive 3 for the Y. So negative 1, positive 3. L is going to be over 2, up 1, so negative 2, positive 1. Okay, so now we're going to do our swap and change rule. So you see now I have these little arrows. I'm literally going to use these same arrows to help me out here. So I know that I'm going to swap and change. In other words, I'm going to change the sign of X, and I'm going to swap it to the back. in y's place. So this negative 4 comes back here and becomes a positive 4. This 4 just moves right up to the front. This negative 1 comes back to the back and becomes a positive 1. This 3 just moves up to the front. Negative 2 comes back over here and has a sign change, so it becomes a positive 2. And this 1, we just move it up to the front. And there are ordered pairs, our primes. So really, if you'd use the swap and change method, right, and you just use your little circle and arrow, you'll actually be able to find the points really quick. And all these points should be in quadrant 1. So let's look. J prime is 4, 4. So I'm going to go over 1, 2, 3, 4, and up 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to put J prime. K prime is 3, 1. Over 1, 2, 3, up 1. So that's going to be K prime. L prime is 1, 2. Over 1, up 2. L prime. So let's go ahead and I'm going to use my protractor to now draw this shape real quick. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and shade this in. Notice it's the same shape. It has changed orientation, right? It's not a reflection, so it don't look quite the same. If you notice, J was pointing to the top left, and now it's pointing to the top right. K was right here, and now it's down here. L was at the very bottom, now it's on the side. And that's because when we rotate it, right, think about if I rotate this pin, right, it's going to change orientation as it goes around. But that's all there was to it. I know everything's in quadrant 1, so I done it correct. Let's take a look at the next one. Alright, on this one right here, we're going to write our rule. It says that we're going to be doing a 180 degrees clockwise turn. So 180 degrees clockwise, well, that's going to be this one. There's my rule. This is going to be real easy on this one. Notice X and Y, the numbers stay in their same relative position. The only thing that we're going to do is we're simply going to change the sign on both of them. So let's go ahead and I'm going to write this rule. I have X and Y. And then I'm going to say I still have X and Y in the same relative position. The only difference is we change the sign of X and we change the sign of Y. It's important for you to figure out your rule, and I'm going to show you in just a minute. We're going to rewrite this rule because whenever I start a test, when I was in college and I was doing transformations, when I got to rotation, I would write this rule out. I would write X and Y, and then I would swap it and put 90 degrees, and swap it and put 180, and swap it and put 270, and swap it and put 360. And that way I had all my rules ready to go. So when I got to the problem, no matter what value it told me to rotate it, I had all of the particular algebraic rules ready to go. And it made it real simple. So I do recommend that you actually draw yourself out a chart like I made down here whenever you're starting these problems on an assessment. But in the meantime, we're going to use what we have. So let's go ahead and write. We have J, and we have K, and we have L. So down here we have J prime, we have K prime, we have L prime. So let's go ahead and write our ordered pair. For J, if I start from origin, right, I'm going to go over 1, 2, 3, 4, and then up 1, 2, 3, 4. So negative 4, positive 4. For K, I'm going to go over 1, and then up 1, 2, 3. Negative 1, positive 3. For L, I'm going to go over 2, up 1. Negative 2, positive 1. Now, before I go ahead and I perform this particular algebraic rule, I want to keep in mind that since I'm turned in 180 degrees, that's two sets of 90s, right? 90 plus 90 equals 180. That means I'm going to go from this quadrant to here with the first 90, and then to the next quadrant for the next 90. So if it's 180 degrees, it'll be in quadrant 4 right down here. So just keep that in mind. I like to draw an arrow because it reminds me that all my points should end up being in this quadrant, where X is positive and Y is negative. With that being said, let's go ahead and perform this process. Change the sign on X and Y. Sign change here. Negative 4 becomes positive 4. Sign change on here. Positive 4 becomes negative 4. Change my sign. Negative 1 becomes positive. Positive 3 becomes negative 3. Sign change. Negative 2 becomes positive 2. Positive 1 becomes -1. And that's all there was to it. That's 180 degrees rotation. So let's plot these points. So I have 4, -4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then down 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's going to be J prime. K prime is 1, -3. Over 1, down 1, 2, 3. And so for L prime, I'm going to go over 2 and down 1. So over 2, down 1. And that's going to be L prime. Go ahead and disregard this point where I dropped my pen. So let's go ahead and let's connect our corners. Alright, and let's shade it in. Notice my shape stayed the same size. All that happened is it changed orientation as it was rotated around. Notice our J was like on the top left, and now it's down on the bottom right. My K was at the top, and now it's at the bottom. My L was at the bottom, it turned out to be at the top, and that's because it just rotated around 180 degrees. I know everything ended up where my X is positive and my Y is negative. So therefore I know I did a good job, and it is correct. It is in quadrant 4. Now, what I would like for you to do, now that I showed you 2 examples, I would like for you to try this one that's 270 degrees clockwise all on your own. You're going to write the rule, and then you're going to go ahead and you're going to perform that rule on those points and plot your image. Now, with that being said, I want you to pause this video, do the work, and then hit play and see if you come up with the same thing I came up with. Alright, with this one, since it said it wants me to rotate it 270 degrees clockwise, I'm going to be using this rule. Notice that X, Y, and X are swapped on this particular rule, but the only one that we have a sign change for, right? Notice our X, we have this X right here, we have this Y right here, so we're going to be changing that sign. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like. When I write my rule, it's simply going to be what I have down there. So we're going to say we have Y, comma, X, and we have a sign change for a Y value. So if we go ahead and work this out, I'm going to go ahead and write our points. I have J, I have K, and I have L. And then we're going to have J prime, I have K prime, and I have L prime. So if we find our ordered pairs, I'm actually going to go over 1, 2, 3, 4, up 1, 2, 3, 4. So -4, +4. For L, over 1, 2, and then up 1. So that's going to be -2 and 1. I did L first, so don't let that confuse you. And then for K, I went over 1 and then up 1, 2, 3. So -1, +3. Alright, so we have -4, 4, -1, 3, and -2, 1. Now let's go ahead and perform our rule. Our rule says that we are going to swap X and Y, and then we're going to change the sign of only the Y value. So here we go. So I'm going to go ahead. I am going to take my X and move it back. Notice that the X, there's no change to it, so it stays -4. My Y value is going to actually change to a -4. With this one right here for K, right, my X value is just going to come over. I'm not going to change that sign. I'm just going to leave it the same, -1. But my 3 is going to have a change when it moves up to the front. So that becomes a -3. My 2 is going to be swapped back to the back, -2. And then this 1 right here, right, it's just going to come over and change it to a -1. And now I have all 3 points. Now some of you might be looking at it going, man, it was a little confusing. We had this Y, but we didn't change the X, but it moved back. We wrote our rule, right? We have already done our swap and change here, and it told us what sign, which value, either the Y or the X, which variable was going to have a change of sign. The only one that had that change symbol, right, that negative symbol in front of it, was our y value, and that's why we changed that y value when we moved it up. Now, with that being said, I want you to consider if we're doing 270 degrees, that's basically 3 90-degree turns. In other words, we're going from here to here is 90, to here is 180, and into quadrant number 3 is actually going to be 270. In other words, my image should end up in this quadrant right here. I know because 270, right, means I go 90, 180, 270. So let's plot our points and see if that's where all these points end up. So J prime is negative 4, 4. So from origin I go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to put J prime. K prime is negative 3, negative 1. So 1, 2, 3, down 1. It's K prime. L prime is negative 1, negative 2. So negative 1 and then down 2. Now if I go ahead and connect my dots, I'm going to shade in my figure and say, well, did my shape move over 3 quadrants? And it did. It moved over 3 quadrants. Notice that this did rotate all the way through. Now, if I did another 90 degrees, it would be back where it started, right? Which would be no change to the x and y. It's exactly where it started from. So now you know how to do every transformation. Now, I told you beforehand I was going to go ahead and go over how to create one of these charts for you. So I want you to pay close attention, and I'm going to put a set of numbers in place of x and y, and I'm going to show you how you can create this. So you're going to do this yourself anytime you have a test so you don't forget, because if one gets you, it's going to be the rotation. So let's say, for instance, we had a ordered pair of 1, 2 for some point on a coordinate plane. And somebody told us, you know what, I need you to change that by 90 degrees. So if we follow this plan, right, where you swap and change, so in other words, I would take this x value right here, and I would move it to the back. It'd become negative 1. And this 2, I would move up to the front. So there's my y value that moved to the front. And that's how a 90-degree swap would look. In other words, we swapped our x and y values. Instead of 1, 2, it's 2, 1. And then we changed that value we moved back, that x that moved back. Now, if they then said, well, you know what, how about you do that same thing, but instead do it 180 degrees. So we're going to move these points 180 degrees. Well, first of all, our 2 and 1 are going to swap back. So notice that we're going to have that swap and change again. That value, right, that 2 now becomes a negative 2, and this negative 1 moves up to the front. So the only thing that happened here at the 180 is that 1, 2 just became negative 1, negative 2. And then if they told us, well, you know, we want you to take it a step further, we want you to go ahead and rotate it 270 degrees. That same ordered pair. Okay, well, we can do that. So what would happen is that negative 1 would then swap back to the back, and it would go from a negative 1 to a positive 1. And this negative 2 would come up to the front, and that would be our new ordered pair. So I'm going to draw this one in black because it turned back positive. Then if they said, okay, now we want you to go ahead and rotate it 360 degrees, put it back exactly where you started from. Well, if I went back to where I start from, I would take this negative 2, right? Move it back, and we're going to have that sign change. So it goes from a negative 2 to a positive 2. This 1 comes up in front, and notice we're back where we started from at 1, 2.